asylum seekers. Is that going to make any difference? We'll be talking with Jason Aldworth, former Vice President of the Victorian Liberal Party, as we always do in a moment. First up, though, Bruce Hawker, political strategist who's basking in the glory of Darwin at the moment. Let's talk about this report. Do you imagine that it's going to change the landscape very much once this report is released, Bruce?
I doubt it very much, Paul. I think the opposition's pretty much set its course on this one. They're not going to deviate from their position. It may give the government some cover if it decides it wants to modify its position somewhat. I think that would be the main value for the government in this report. But Scott Morrison's made it quite clear that it doesn't matter what the government's going to do. They're going to keep opposing the government's position on asylum seekers because it's a political winner for them.
Yeah. And in the end, aren't they right when they say we have a policy, it's Labor that is bereft of a workable policy here, so this report isn't for us, it's just for Labor. This is their problem to sort out.
Well, it is the government's problem essentially to sort out, but of course if there was some bipartisanship around the question of processing refugees in Malaysia, then of course we could solve the problem overnight. So yes and no. The opposition, if it wanted to, could come together with the government, pass legislation to overcome the High Court's ruling on Malaysia, and therefore deter boat people. But they're not going to do that because they're on a political winner. Yeah.
Interesting that you suggest that this report could give Labor the opportunity to back down, certainly compromise to a greater extent. How important politically is it for the government that they sort this out in the next few months?
I think it's very important, Paul. It's one of these things that just won't go away for them. If it was the only issue that was plaguing them, I think that they could deal with it. But of course, on top of the other problems they've got, it just adds to a sense of not being in control of our borders, which is always a serious problem for any government. Having said that, of course, you know, the size of the boat people problem is nothing compared to other countries, but in the minds of electors, it's a significant problem.
Yeah, and that's what it is, isn't it? The truth isn't always the important thing. It's the perception, quite often in politics, that's the important thing. Just very quickly, Bruce, there's a report out today that the federal government employ around 1,600 media, communications, marketing and public affairs personnel. I'll say that number again, around 1,600. You know, the opposition are just saying this shows that it's all about the spin rather than real policy.
Well, I'm sorry to say I'm not one of them. But, look, I think this has always been the case with governments. Certainly in the last 20 years, they've been employing more and more people to sell their story, sell their message. It's something that you're seeing in the private sector as well. It seems to me that that is an area where they could cut back substantially if they wanted to, because, you know, there's only so many media outlets you can deal with on any one time, and you could just about have about 4 or 5 people for every one of them.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
I don't think it's something that they should really look seriously at culling over a period. Yep.
Excellent, Bruce. Thank you very much for joining us. Bruce Hawker there, political strategist. Jason